welcome back for another episode of Dollar Bin Digging. This is the video and article that I do for comicbookinvest.com where I talk about those cheap books you can still probably find tucked away in those dollar boxes, those discount bins, those flea market finds. These are the cheap books that I think you can keep an eye out for when you're out there digging this upcoming weekend. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I know most of the summer has been kind of busy for me, but I'm hoping to get back to this on a more regular basis. So please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure that you like, you subscribe, you hit the alert button so you don't miss anything. Keep telling your friends so we can keep growing the channel. And if you want to see this week's selection of Dollar Bin books, just hang on for a few seconds after the intro, and I will be right back. All right, so let's take a look at what I have in store for you this week. I had planned to bring this show back maybe about a month ago, but time just wasn't on my side this past summer with my son's schedule, with swimming and football, etc. So I had to put this on the back burner for a little bit, but it is back, and I hope to have this out on a more regular basis for you guys. With that said, there was one book I was going to cover last month that I still felt that I wanted to cover today, so I have this as new last month. Yes, issue 20 just came out, but let's go back to issue 19 because I want to spotlight this character right here on the front because I think it's a fun little book and I think it's a fun little character, and that is her right here with Wade Wilson. That's right, this is Outlaw. The character of Outlaw has been around for a little bit of a while. She showed up in that Domino Hotshot series for a bit, and she goes all the way back to the original Deadpool run, issue 65 from March of 2002. No, that's not her on the cover, but she is inside this book in a very brief little spot. So inside this Deadpool book, which, again, this is a popular cover because of the Playboy Bunny bit, but if you could find it, it is a fun little book that does have Outlaw right back here, sitting at the bar. He has a couple of exchanges with her, but that's really it. Call it a cameo, call it whatever you want. She's in the book, and that's her across a couple of pages and a few panels. With that all said, issue 65, as I mentioned, does well for itself because of the Playboy Bunny aspect of it. So you can see some issues sell as high as almost $40. Not so much for the first appearance of Outlaw, which some might note here and there. And there's a couple other characters that also show up for the first time. But it's the cover, really, that kind of is, I think, the big draw for this one. So $20 you can see is an average sale price. Higher end is closer to $40. Asking prices, well, a lot of them are asking $45. I know. You're probably asking $45. Well, how am I going to find that in a dollar bin? You never know what you might find in a dollar bin. That's why I'm pointing this out. This isn't a book that I think everybody would have noted out the outset saying, you know what, that's the first appearance of Outlaw. That's an expensive book. Why is he talking about it? I'm trying to give information here. So if you're digging out in a box, maybe you come across a run of Deadpools, and now you know this is the first appearance of Outlaw because I'm giving you some information. With that said, you never know what you're going to find, whether you be at half-price books, yard sales, flea markets. Yes, your LCS might be a little bit more in the know and may pull books like this out, but not all of them do. So it doesn't hurt to look, and information never hurt anyone. So with that all said, keep an eye out for Deadpool number 65. It's near the end of the run, but not quite the end, because I think it ran to, what, 69? I think it ended at 69, and I think I covered that on Last to Know not that long ago. But with that said, that's the book that I was going to cover a month ago. Going to put the rest of them that I was planning on doing on the back burner because, well, they're outdated. So we're going to get to the new books for this week, starting off with Amazing Spider-Man number 11, Legacy issue 975, as ASM closes in on that magical 1000th issue. So with that said, we've split Spidey into two storylines here. Main story Spidey, and we got a backup cosmic, story Spidey. Granted, the backup story is the real Spidey and the real Peter Parker, but I'll let you read this issue to find all out the details on that for yourselves. But inside this book, we can talk about one of the reveals that the Peter Parker that's been running around isn't Peter Parker. It's actually Ben Reilly, who now goes by the character name of Chasm. So Ben Reilly, yes, not inexpensive, but it's a well-known first, going back quite a ways. But we can look at the first appearance of him as Chasm as something that you might want to track down, because he's only been Chasm for a couple of years. Now, this character of Chasm first showed up in 2022 in issue 93 of whatever volume of Spider-Man that was. Spider-Man's had so many new number ones over the last decade, I can't keep track. But, as we know, Legacy 975, this was Legacy issue 894. So a good number of issues ago. So a few years, as we noted. But Issue 93 was when we were first introduced. At the end of it, Ben Reilly kind of lost his shit and started going after Peter Parker. He had blonde hair at the time, Ben Reilly, that is, and he ended up becoming this evil character of Chasm, more evil version, the evil twin, the evil clone, however you want to talk, however you want to cover it. That's kind of his current character status right now. So he's currently a heel. We might see a face turn again at some point, but for now, Chasm is a heel. And this book is not all that expensive. It's got a hefty cover price of $6 at the time. So when you see sales for best offer on $8, $10 sale there, but that was with free shipping. So that's really an undercover price book. And dollar bin digging may be a misnomer these days because there are fewer and fewer dollar boxes because comics cost so much more these days. So dollar boxes are becoming more of a thing of a past. But there are discount boxes. They could be $2 boxes, $3 boxes, half cover print, whatever. This is the point of this is we're talking discount buys. And this is a book that you can probably find for less than cover. As you can see some listed, $4.99. Yes, there is one looking for $18, but by and large, you could find this on the cheaper side if you go out there hunting and digging and find yourself that first Chasm. Now, with that said, that was in the front story of the Spider-Man book this week, the ASM. And yes, there is a reveal over who's in the Spider-Man suit. And it's not, Peter Parker or OG Peter Parker, because OG Peter Parker is in space. And on his adventures in space, he came across this guy right here. Yeah, this big controller of the brood, academic zoologist of space is kind of his little pocket, his little character, I guess. And that's Xanto Starblood. Interesting name, it is what it is. But Xanto Starblood first appeared way back again, as I mentioned, controlling the brood in Wolverine and the X-Men #5 back in 2012. So almost, what is that, like 13 years ago, 14, almost 15 years ago at this point. And yeah, you got that fun, look at this is like back-to-back Bradshaw covers, just by coincidence. But inside this book, we do get introduced to Xanto as it's revealed that he is the one controlling these brood at the time against the more cosmic end of things. I think Peter Quill and Kitty Pryde were a thing at this time as they kind of were changing up the Guardians of the Galaxy and even the X-Men. I'm a fan of the cosmic universe stuff in the Marvel side of things, so this kind of stuff is always fun to me. But this book is not that expensive. This is the first run, I believe, of Wolverine and the X-Men, issue 5, leading into A vs. X. Look at that. At auction, 91 cents. $1.95, buy it now. So again, cheap book, easy to find, first appearance. Yeah, he's not a major character, but it's still kind of fun to find books like that. And copies listed are, $3 or $8 or as high as $13. You might even find a little bit more than that. Who knows? Maybe Xanto gets a bigger profile at some point and becomes a character and a mainstay in ASM for a little while as Peter Parker is doing his adventures in space. I don't know. We don't know. Just a fun little first you can find for cheap is the point of why I'm bringing this up. With that said, also at Marvel this week, we had Laura Kinney Wolverine #10. And here, she's mixing it up with the vampires. And we can see way back there, we have Zaris. Yeah, and also inside the book, we have Zaris. Zaris is one of the sons of Dracula. Kind of a convoluted little bit of a history, especially with that blood hunt stuff. I think he was experimented upon and he's got some mutant powers or something. It's hard to keep up with everything. But Zaris, as a character, goes back to the death of Dracula, which was a one-shot released in 2010. I love finding this book on its own anyway, and there is a second print that takes the heroic age bit off of it. So either copy you could find is probably worth your time. They used to be more pricey, but these days you can find them for a little bit more of an acceptable cost, I think. But there it is. One of his Dracula's sons, Zaris, right there. So inside this book, you get a couple of firsts. And this one, like I said, it's sold as cheap as $1.50, $6, $10. Yeah, that $6 is the second print cover that I was mentioning without the heroic age across the top. Asking prices could be under $10, could be closer to $15. This used to be like a $20 to $30 book at one time. Will it find its way back there? Maybe. It depends on what we see out of the vampire side of things. I mean, Blood Hunt was a big event for the vampires. Probably not going to get something that big for a while, but we are also still expecting a Blade movie. So who knows? Who knows who we might see? Mix it up with Blade if they eventually decide to make that Mahershala Ali film. With that all said, it's still a book you can go and look for when you're out there digging, because it's a couple of fun firsts with the vampire sons of Dracula in there. And yeah, just like you said, cool book. With that said, I think I got one more Marvel book for you. Sticking with the cosmic side of things, Imperial War Exiles, another little one-shot, little tie-in to the Imperial event. Here we have Charles Xavier and the Shi'ar connections that he has, since, Lilandria, was his main squeeze, and they do have a kid, and that kid is the character I want to talk about today, because that kid is currently the Magistrix, the lead of the Shi'ar Empire that Gladiator handed over to her. So Xandra Naramani, her aunt, Anti-Deathbird, also right there in the storyline. I like all this stuff. So this is a character, I know I've talked about her before, but doesn't hurt to bring it back up and give information to newer viewers and just kind of remind you guys something to keep a lookout for. So Magistrix Xandra first appeared way back in Mr. and Mrs. X, that little series of a married couple of Gambit and Rogue going on their own adventures. Issue 2 technically is her first. Right at the end of the book, coming out of an egg. Yep, coming out of an egg. I know it sounds weird. She came and appeared as a young rogue. That's her, though. It doesn't look like her, but that was technically her. And yes, you call it a cameo, whatever you want. She popped out of an egg at the end of the issue as this big shock reveal of a young rogue coming out of this metal egg thing. But that's her. You'll find out in the next issue. But before we get to the next issue, let's look at the prices on this one, which can go anywhere from like $3 to $7. There it is, packaged with issue 1 for a little over $10. Asking prices, however, could be more. Look, people are looking for $10 all the way up to $30. Some call it the first appearance of Xandra because that is her. Others just don't even bother, because most people look for this next issue, which gives the whole history. You got Lilandria there, you got Chuck. It's more explained, and she takes the form that we all know. And again, this is September 2018 at this point. She takes the form that we all know now as this younger-looking Shi'ar princess. Before she became Magistrix, she was a little princess. So here she is, Xandra. So this is the one a lot of people point to as her first full or whatever, and throw a few extra bucks at it. So issue 3 has sales around $13, $15, as high as like $23 recently. Asking prices $15 to $25. It's kind of in that ballpark. Yes, there are incentives for this book as well you can look for, but we're just talking about the regular issues, things you might find buried in a cheap box. And I know these prices, you would think it's going to be tough to find this for cheap, because a lot of people do know this book and might pull it if they get it in a collection, like an LCS. Might see this in a collection, might grab it, price it, or they might just ignore it because they're not really worried about a side X title that ran for a short time in Mr. and Mrs. X, and it gets blended in with the X Factors and X Force books that just end up in the cheap side of things. So who knows? But with that said, those are the Marvel books that came out this week that I wanted to talk about, and I got some DC stuff. But before we get to the DC stuff, I want to remind any of you out there who need supplies, use my code RENA10 over at BCW to get 10% off your entire order. That's your bags, your boards, your long boxes, your short boxes, your CGC boxes, top loaders, and stuff with pages related to your cards, top loaders for your cards. Basically anything to keep your comics and collectibles safe. BCW's probably got a product, and if you're going to spend money on supplies, you might as well save 10% off while you do it and use my code RENA10. So with that, you really got nothing to lose. You help out the channel, so give it a thought and give it a try next time you order over there. With that said, let's get to DC and talk about what's got to be the big release book of the week, and that is, yes, Batman. We got a new Batman #1. I made fun of Marvel for all of the ASM #1s for Spider-Man because, yes, there haven't been a ton. And, yeah, Batman's going to start following suit, it seems, but not as many. I mean, we got the OG, you got the New 52, you got the Rebirth, and you got this one. So, 4, with almost 100 years of history, not terrible, I guess. But still, do we really need a new #1? Couldn't we just get a new arc and, I don't know, whatever. Point being, DC's all in, new this week, Batman #1, which was actually a pretty fun read. And at the end of it, I just want to point out that my favorite Robin of the Dick Graysons, and even concluding Damian and Jason Todd, I always liked Tim Drake, because Tim Drake was the Robin in the 90s, and that's when I started reading books. So I'm a little bit partial to Tim Drake as Robin, and I'm glad to see that they gave him the Robin mantle back for this storyline, or at least for this series, because he'd been lost, like, for decades. They had no idea what to do with him. They tried to make him Red Robin. They tried to do all kinds of crazy things with him. Happy to see him back as just playing Robin. We'll see how long that lasts. But with that said, this is Tim Drake as Robin showing up at the end of the issue. And as I said, I'm happy to see it, and I want to see more of it. So let's go back to a little bit of a history lesson on Tim Drake and look at some of his old books, because we can first see him show up in Batman Year 3 in issue 436 as a little kid in the crowd. Little kid in the crowd who's watching Dick Grayson's parents get offed in that Year 3 storyline. There, right there in the corner. He's in a couple other panels too, but he's there with his family. I just picked this one because it says, Timmy, don't look, because little Timmy is Tim Drake. So, yeah, and I'll admit, the art here wasn't great. I mean, Dick Grayson down below looks a little bit like a little short grown man, but it is what it is. This is the first Tim Drake book that's not all that expensive. You can see copies here selling for $10 to $15, sure. $8 got the whole 1 through 4 run, so there are cheaper options out there. And then as far as listings go, yes, some 15 to 22 listings, but then there's also the $5 copy. So you could find this out there. I'm telling you not to go buy online, though. Go dig in a box at your shops, at your flea markets, at your yard sales, wherever you do your cheap comic hunting. Keep an eye out for issue 436 for your first Tim Drake. Now, that's just him as a little boy. He puts on, and he ends up being a little side character running through Batman for a while, and he actually ends up putting on the Robin costume here in A Lonely Place of Dying, issue 442. So, half dozen issues or so later, he puts on the Robin costume. Granted, he wasn't made Robin. Alfred kind of directed him to do so and gives him the costume to put on. So there he goes and does it. Batman was none too happy about this because, again, at this time, we're talking about him still reeling from what happened to Jason Todd and, the audience basically voting him to die via the Joker. Anyway, this book is another one. It's not too expensive because he's first time he dresses as Robin, but he's not technically Robin yet. He just kind of dresses up as him. So we can hem and haw about semantics all we want, but the point being, it's not expensive. Copies, $2, $4, highs of 10. Copies listed 5, 7, 15. Again, not that expensive. And another one you can find heavily printed. There are a lot of these out there. These two storylines in particular, I've always come across in those cheap boxes because Batman was very popular for a run, especially after the Batman 1999 movie. There's a lot of copies of some of these runs. So with that said, let's get on to the book that most people recognize and take as the new Robin. And this is Batman 457. Yeah, there he is on the cover in shadow, Scarecrow. And there are multiple versions of this book. I'm not going to get into all of that because there's the second print error, yada, yada, yada. And second print error, very tough to find. The only way you can really find out is by opening the book and looking at the indicia, if I'm saying it right. It doesn't say it on the cover. You got to open the book up to know what printing you're looking at here. But at the end of this issue, Tim Drake is introduced as the new Robin, and with that costume that I like. And again, it's the Robin that I associate with the character from the 90s when he got his own little solo series. I like the high collar. I like the black cape over the yellow, like the little hints of black. He's wearing pants instead of having his bare legs shown like the old Robins. Made more sense. Plus, he had a badass bow staff. That said, Tim Drake is your new Robin in this issue. And regardless of which version you find, you can find copies for about $7. Best offer on 25. Copies listed $9, $10, $12. It was heavily printed. Again, it got a second print. And yes, there was a second print error. So it was a heavily published book. So there are copies out there if you want to go and look for them. Now, one more book covering this week over on the DC side of things. I wanted to look at Cheetah and Cheshire, Rob the Justice League, because you know what? I kind of didn't really give this book a shot with issue 1, but then by issue 2, I mean, they're going to rob the Justice League. It's kind of a heist storyline. I'm kind of into it, so decided to give it a look-see, and it's kind of fun. And especially with them building out a squad. And that's kind of what we're going to get into here as we look at the characters inside this. You all know Cheetah. Been around for a while, Minerva, yada, yada, yada. Not going to get into her first. But Cheshire, it's a little bit of a lesser-known DC character for most of the general populace. So let's take a look at here Cheshire's first, because she kind of gets overlooked. because she shares a first appearance with a slightly more popular character, or more popular these days because of a little show called Peacemaker. And that is this book right here, is Cheshire's first. All new, yeah, the new Teen Titans annual number 2. And front and center, you got Vigilante on the cover. And yes, it is the first appearance of Vigilante, but also inside this book is the first appearance of Cheshire. So let's not forget about that. Sometimes books have multiple firsts, and some characters get overlooked. Because of the Vigilante appearances and Peacemaker rolling with new episodes right now, this book has gotten a little pricier of late. Even ended up on the Hot 10 a couple of times, I think. It's going $8 to $12. You can still find cheap copies out there, or affordable copies, I should say. Copies listed $12 to $15. It's not a super duper expensive book. You could find it, especially go out there hunting, go out there digging. And like I said, you get the first appearance of Cheshire along with Vigilante. So sometimes you get more than one character inside the guts of these books. Now, going back to it, in the background here, we also have another character I want to talk about, and that is Cheshire's daughter. But we'll take a look at a better shot of her right here, and that is a character called, Leon Harper. Leon Harper is the daughter of Roy Harper, Speedy, Arsenal, Teen Titan. So Teen Titan and a villain, Cheshire, had a kid. This girl right here, Leanne Harper. She's part of this little heist squad too, hanging out with her mom and Cheetah. We see her, and I know people love Baby Spec, show up in this issue. Granted, I don't love this cover, but New Teen Titans, or The New Teen Titans, number 21. This is the second run of Teen Titans. So it had these like painted covers that, again, I'm not a huge fan of. But inside the guts of this book, we find out who is the father of Cheshire's child. And we're introduced to Cheshire's child. So right here at the end, this little redheaded girl is redheaded Roy's, I don't want to say the popular thing, but yes, little Leon Harper is introduced right there in the back of this book. So I know it's a Baby Spec, but it's her, and it's her first appearance. And it's a very, very cheap book. You could find this thing for $1 at auction, $3. Copies listed $3, close to 10 to 15 at times. Could be a little bit more expensive, but by and large, you could find a cheap copy if you go out there hunting for it. And again, Roy and Cheshire's daughter, part of this little heist squad. Now, throughout the rest of this issue, Cheetah and Cheshire are going out to recruit some more for their team. Starting off here first with Cheshire asking this character, Becky. Who is Becky? Well, she is the granddaughter of a character called the Gambler, and that's who she's supposedly, I think, helping out here at this casino. And then just got some characters kind of fun sitting in the background, but she is, sort of luck, probability, powers of a sort. But she went by the name of Hazard on her own, introduced way back in the 80s in Infinity Incorporated. That's right, this issue here, 1986. This is a McFarlane cover? I think this is a McFarlane era of doing the Infinity Incorporated. Yeah, right there, it says McFarlane. This is also the first appearance of the Global Guardians. But at the end of this issue, we also get the baddies introduced, and Hazard was one of them right here. Boom. So there's your first Hazard with her, again, little probability sort of powers. Not an expensive book, but one you should keep an eye out for. Bright yellow cover. Can sell for like $5. Copies listed $7 to $10. Again, not an expensive first. Something you can go and find and dig for. And it's first appearance of the Global Guardians and Hazard there. Who knows? Again, I'm not saying Hazard's going to be DC's next big thing, but she's going to be part of this little storyline in this miniseries. So if you're interested, you can go and find her first. Meanwhile, Cheetah is going off to recruit this little guy right here, little witch boy, Klarion. Remember him? Seven Soldiers is kind of when he got more popular, but he goes way back. He goes back longer than most of these characters we've talked about. Our character here of Klarion Bleak and his familiar cat. Or I should say, cat is his familiar. The whole witch thing with a familiar. Anyway, point being, Klarion goes all the way back to the 70s, if you weren't aware, of Demon. So, the Demon issue 7, back in 1973, right there on the cover, you see Klarion being introduced. Klarion the Witch Boy. Here he is, better shot of him, in case you're curious, right there. And he's got his familiar cat with him. Yeah, the cat's familiar, and the cat is his familiar. Every time I say it, it makes me want to clarify it for some reason. Point being, It's not that expensive a book, even though it goes back to the 70s. As you can see here, yes, there are copies that could sell for like $10, $15, closer to 20. But then there's, ones listed in kind of the same range. You're going to pay for condition as well. But 13 to 18 seems to be the range of asking prices right now. But again, you never know. You flip through a box, you got to find some of this older DC stuff from the 70s, some of this Bronze Age sort of books. You never know what you might be finding when you're out there digging. So keep an eye out for the Demon. It's not Demon number 1. It's issue 7. You might luck into a first Klarion. Now, with all of that said, both of them recruited another member of their little heist squad. But at the end of the issue, we actually get a first appearance in that book. So this isn't really part of Dollar Bin Digging. It could be a future Dollar Bin Digging book. So look at issue 2 of Cheetah and Cheshire, Rob the Justice League, as we are introduced to this girl right here. First appearance. Pink hair and all. Yes, she kind of looks like, what was her name? Powerhouse from Runaways with that little, kitty cat hoodie. Well, I think it was a bunny hoodie over at Marvel. But she is pretty strong. She's a strong character, and she goes by the name of Featherweight. But more important, her name is Alia Ratko, if I'm saying that. No, if I'm saying that anywhere close to right. That name should be familiar to you, because that tells you who her mother is. And if you didn't know, her mother is Nissa Ratko, or Nissa Al Ghul, the other daughter, not Talia, to Ra's al Ghul. However, I like saying Raz. I know it's not right, but saying it for decades that way, it's kind of hard to shake. Ra's al Ghul, basically the demon head, or whatever. His daughter, his other daughter, Nissa, who was first introduced in Death and the Maidens. We can get to that another time. I think I've talked about that before. Point being, interesting lineage here for this character. So we may see Featherweight stick around for a little while. And just keep thinking about a book to think about it, because it could be a future Dollar Bin book. With all that said, I want to end the show there. Thank you all for stopping by and checking this out. I do appreciate all the support, and I'll try to keep this series going along with Sneaky Keys and Last to Know. I got a new show that I'm still trying to work out the finer details, a little show called Spec Check that I'm sure you all will enjoy as well. So with all that said, I'll see you all later with some more content. All right.